Hello, dear ones. This is Corinne from Rebel Heart Woman, and I am really excited to continue the series that I started in 2021, where I celebrate the unconventional lives of child-free women. Yeah? And in this series, I speak to inspiring women who are either child-free by choice or circumstances, and sometimes both. Yeah? And yeah, who are willing to share their stories and how they came to live the child-free life, being on this life path, at least in this lifetime. Yeah. And we talk about challenges of being on this path, but also the magic and the meaning that we all have found within the child-free life. Yeah. And today I'm going to talk to Anne Casper, who is calling in from Portland, Oregon. Anne is 53 years old and she has a wonderful, inspiring story. And so, first of all, I just want to welcome you. Welcome, Anne. Thanks for
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you so
reaching
much.
out.
Yes, yes.
Beautiful.
Being here, and it's very empowering what you're doing for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Anne is a mental health diplomat and a senior peer outreach specialist, as well as a preschool Japanese instructor. Yeah, so Anne, she really wears many hats, as you will hear throughout our conversation. And although not a mother to her own child, Anne really loves children. And she actually used to be the most popular babysitter at her high school back in the days. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Anne, like I like to just begin this conversation always with the question, what is a life for you? Right now, it's evening in Portland, and can be a word or a sentence just for us to drop into the call a little bit more.
Life for me right now is learning how to embody joy in a crazy world. How's that? And to look at these experiences, which are very tough for us all over the world, but where can we find that joy? It may not look like what we expect it to. Where can we find that contentness, that happiness?
I love that. And it resonates deeply with me at this point in
Mm.
time, too. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, well, Anne, so you know, what really came through the first time when we had a chat together was how much you love actually being around children, yeah, and teenage girls as well. And so I like to drop right in, can you just share with our audience how, despite of actually really loving children and being around children, loving their energy, how you came to live child-free or childless?
Yes, I didn't always plan to be child free. I thought when I was younger, like many young women do, they'd be like their mothers and have a child by a certain age. And it just didn't work out that way. I had been diagnosed with a mental illness, and that meant my life path was very different than what I had expected or even thought was going to happen. Um, so I absolutely, like you said, I love children and I spend as much time as I can, but I'm so happy without them. So it was actually through the United States mental health system and health system that I decided not to have a child
Mm, mm,
because for 20 years, and I was a university teacher, instructor of English as a second language, and I also worked with refugees. And as an adjunct instructor in the United States, I could not buy any health insurance, even though I had the money, because I had a mental health diagnosis. And that meant no health insurance, mental, physical, any health insurance for 20 years. And also, I ended up later on in the public system, mental health system, and that's not a healthy system. And I came to realize in my 30s that it was better for me not to have a child, even though I love children, because watching what the system does, people with mental health diagnosed with mental health issues, what they do to the mothers and the children, I could not do that to a child. So basically, I guess as we spoke before, Green, it was a sacrifice. I gave up that dream because I didn't want to do that to a child.
Mm. Yeah. And that is just such a, I think that that sacrifice really touched me last time, when I heard you share it, your story with me. So it's really, and making that sacrifice, obviously there's been a lot of, I guess, soul searching and thoughts going into that. It hasn't been a decision, I'm sure, that you made lightly. And as you say, like for you, there was a sacrifice in it. Yeah. But you made that sacrifice basically in service of the unborn child. Yeah.
Yes.
And that,
And actually,
yeah,
Green, I'm very happy now. It's not that I'm sad about it. I'm happy about that choice. And
yeah,
I feel fulfilled as a woman without my own child. I don't need my own child to be a happy woman.
yes, yes. And how, okay, so let's speak a little bit more about that. So once you made that decision, okay, you're not going to have a child of your own. Um, how then did you, because we spoke about mothering and nurturing in other ways, yeah, directing your mothering energy and your motherly, you had a word for that, but you actually do feel quite motherly, you said, in the
I
last
do.
call.
I actually, yes,
Yeah,
I
and
see
how
as
do you bring
about
that
mother.
in? How did you then find ways to bring that into your life? And in what way did that give your life meaning and add to that joy and happiness that you have now within your Childfree life without your own child?
Yes. I think every project we do is like a child in a way. So, any of us who carry projects, that is mothering. And there are different ways of bringing the feminine ways into mothering. And as we're doing more and more feminine ways, I think the projects on earth are going to be better. So, for example, I helped build 2 mental health hospitals. And in that, I brought in community. I help people listen to each other. There's certain those the feminine mothering qualities you can bring into anything. And also I get time with children. So it's not like I'm cut off from children, but I taught for 20 years and even teaching adults, that's sometimes like being with big children. So if you're a teacher, you'll find out sometimes the big bodies are just little children inside.
Mm.
So there are many principles and practices to mothering that can relate to any kind of work that we do, if that
Mm.
makes
Yeah, so beautiful said. And I agree 150% with what you just
sense.
shared. And I think it's such an important message that you really speak to this as child-free women more, how we can direct this mothering energy in other ways, but also how we can embody these other feminine expressions, these other expressions of the feminine that are outside of the traditional role of being a mother and motherhood. Yeah, because I
Yes.
do know, you and I, we feel that motherly energy quite strongly and bring it in. But I also know that, there are some women, for them, that's just not their primary feminine energy. They have other feminine
Yes.
expressions that they are here to live and to express, and with which to create meaningful things in this world. Yeah, like creating projects, or yeah, other creative projects. So yeah, love that. And one thing you mentioned last time, which I felt was very touching, is you worked for 8 years with the refugees, the Kurdish. I'm not sure if I pronounced that
So
right.
Kurdish, actually, yes, I'm still helping the Kurdish people. Yes, Kurdish are about more than 40 million people in the world without their own country yet. And so I helped in the 1990s. I was working in refugee resettlement, and we had in the United States 5,000 Kurdish people from northern Iraq and Iran in that area come to the United States all at once. And as it was my job at that time to help many different refugees from many different countries come to Portland, Oregon, and resettle and get food, housing, clothing, transportation, education. I did that. A big group came, I think it was in 1996 in Portland, about 500. And I met the children, of course, who came with the families. And some of them were 3 or 4 years old at the time. And now they're older adults. And as older adults, I found out what I did made such a difference, which I didn't know at the time. I'm finding out 30 years later. And basically all I did would show up at the house. I had a cat. I had a cat for 18 years. I would actually bring the cat to the refugee homes and have the cat play with the children. And I was just like the constant presence for them, coming once or twice a week or even once a month to the homes. And they told me my visits made such a big difference. And in fact, I had heard from one young woman last month. She had called me and she said, wow, just hearing your voice brings me back to those good memories when I was a child when you were there. So their parents were struggling. Their mothers and fathers were struggling with trying to adapt to a new country, new culture. They hadn't planned to move to the United States. They thought they would live in northern Iraq and Kurdistan all their lives. So they're in a big stress. And here I could come in and just play with the children and be with them and be that presence, that motherly, steady presence that didn't change for them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And also you helped build them like community, like right in a new place. Yeah, which is
Yes.
also when we look back at and we talked on that, we need to live in this world now. We are modern women, but we can draw on wisdom when we look back, further back beyond, the last 2,000 years, but where we had maybe lived more in matriarchal societies, but also where there was more this feeling of the village, and within a village, there were always women who didn't have children of their own, but who would, help raise and support the ones who had children. Yeah, it was less nuclear family like it is today, and it was much more, everyone took a little bit care of the children and added their guidance and their wisdom. And I think this is something that a lot of actually child-free women in some way actually do long for, to be in relationship with children, to be involved within community, but not as the primary caregiver for that child. They just see their role as a different role. And this is just, this is something I want to see coming back more. Like, how do you feel about that, with your experience?
Well, in my experience, some cultures already have that. And in fact, they have the word aunties, right? The auntie.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's just bringing it back into these other cultures here that
Western world, right?
Yes, I actually come and hear that from my family in Hawaii or in Asia. They use the word auntie. And yes, you are just part of that whole village or the whole city, and the children. When I grew up in Northeast Portland, you couldn't ride your bike a half mile or something away, do something wrong, and the family wouldn't know. The family would know it. So we had community. I grew up in that. And I'm hoping that younger generations will come to understand what community can be. It makes a difference. Because if someone saw us do something wrong a mile or 2 miles down, they would call my mother. They would know who to call my father. It was that kind of community in the United States.
Yeah, it was the same where I grew up in Switzerland, like I had all my aunties and uncles within the same village, and I felt very embedded within the wider family. And one of my aunts has become one of my most, my first mentor, really. And she's actually child-free. So from her, I do have that model. Yeah. But maybe I think when we are, but it kind of within family, it can happen naturally when you live within the same area, right?
But also
now these days,
who are not related either. So in Hawaii, again, call them auntie, and you don't have to have blood relations with the children to be connected.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful that you don't have to be blood related. That there's other ways to have that with a child. Oh, yeah. And then, so you said some of these girls actually have written to you later on, right? And they're actually going back, they're no longer in Portland, right?
They're back in the Middle East, yes, and they contact me either through, social media or phone calls or something, yes.
Yeah,
So, and
beautiful.
it surprised me. I had no idea, honestly, how much of an impact it had on their lives
Mm,
and the way they saw me, because I was, definitely the Western woman, definitely blonde and blue-eyed. And when the Kurdish first came to Portland, they wanted to have a New Year's party because every spring the Kurds have this New Year's party for about 4 or 5 thousand years.
mm,
So they want to continue that in Portland. And when it came down to it, it was 14 men around a table and me, because they weren't allowing the women at the table
yeah.
at that time, but they needed me because I had the local information. So
Mm,
I sat there and said, well, how can I bring women in? What can I do? And I suggested that we make it a potluck.
mm.
So the women would bring the food, they could be part of it and then help decorate. And now, 20, 30 years later, who's making the New Year's parties? It's the young college students in their 20s, and it's men and women equally doing it. It is so fantastic to watch that shift.
Beautiful. Wow. And I know you have a love for the Middle East, right? We talked about that
Yes.
because I just came back from Saudi Arabia.
Oh,
And you know, we talked about how part of our work of having these conversation of opening up about, you know, the child-free life more in a, you know, just like women, like normal women, real women talking about this. Yeah.
yeah.
How we find it, you know, like especially in some traditions, you know, it's really like a woman's only purpose is really to have children and raise children. And we also want to kind of shine a light on, well, you know, there's other ways of living your life too, and you do not have to be a mother. Yeah. And so
No.
how do you feel, you want to speak a little more about that, of what you, yeah.
Certainly. I think because I study linguistics, I'm going to use a different word. I think it's expected that they become mothers. And then if you don't become a mother, it kind of looks like something strange. And in fact, some of these old cultures I work with, the Somali culture, the Kurdish culture, or Japanese culture, they worry about me because I'm not married and I don't have children. In fact, the Kurds try to have an arranged marriage for me because they were so worried. But it's expected in a way, and there's a myth that goes through the world that says a woman needs a child to be fulfilled.
And to be fully woman too, right? To
Yeah,
be a
I don't
real woman. So if you don't give birth to your child, you're not a real woman. That feels
I don't
that.
believe that. I just know
No.
from my own experience, for me, only for me, I can speak only for one person, that's not true. I feel very happy, very satisfied. Life is not perfect, but it's given me the chance to actually in life give me a lot of time to contemplate on philosophy, on different things that if I had a child around, I just wouldn't have time, because I know this because I've helped raise other people's children. I've also helped teach. A child, if you're doing really good parenting, will get attention a lot, get a lot of attention, take a lot of time. And to be a good parent, you need, I think, to give that attention and time to the children. And as a child-free woman, I had that attention and time I could spend on other new ideas, on
And other core interests, right? Other
of
things
course,
that you
yes,
find
yes,
interesting that
absolutely.
bring you joy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
like.
I know some women, Corinne, who tell me they're very sad without children.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's good for them. That's where they're at. And that's very good and well acceptable for them. It's fine.
Yeah.
In my experience, I'm just fine. In
Yeah.
fact, there's a freedom you have without having children. And because for me, I've been lucky with good parents and good grandparents and the whole lineage. So having a child goes beyond 18 years. It goes on until you're gone, right? So
Yeah.
that line of beautiful relationship, but that also as I understand it, the mother is connected with the child always in
Mm.
some kind of aspect. So it's hard to always, I just know for me, I have the freedom that other women don't have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that word of freedom and the freedom that in many things, yeah, I mean, we could dissect that, the freedom to do what exactly, but you already spoke to some of that. But yeah, and that's why I think I prefer the word child free instead of
Uh-huh,
childless,
uh-huh.
because there's a freedom in it and not a less of a life. Yeah, but at the
Yeah.
same time I can fully resonate, and I have been there. I wanted a child at some point. That feeling of there's obviously grief, and there's different layers you go through, and maybe for you made the decision at some point, okay, we're moving on, this is not in our books in this lifetime, and that's it's still, but it can still happen that 2 years later a layer arises, and then it's always important to look at that layer and to feel it, and to see, okay, what does that want to say to you right now, or is it just something from the past that needs to travel through? Like it's almost like, I think this question of having a child or not, that of course at some point it's done,
Mhm.
it's
Yes,
over.
you get old
But
enough that it's very difficult. Yes.
but the layers around it, they keep showing up. There might be moments where you are wondering, wow, but what would my life have been like with a child? Like it's this just, and I think I want to just also address that it's not like you said before. It's not everything is perfect within a child-free life, but then it isn't within the life of a mother either.
Mhm.
Like a mother goes through times where she asks herself, well, was that the right decision to have a child, right? Like I do know, I have very open moms, uh, who are speaking frankly, and it's not either side, whichever life path you choose, there
Mhm.
isn't it all comes with challenges. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're bringing up you choose, Corinne, because some women in the world don't really have a choice.
Yes.
They don't always have, and I understand this because I've been to 18 countries, I've worked with women all over the world. They don't always have a choice to get birth control or not. They don't always have a choice not to have a child. And we have to realize that and support these women too. And I've had friends here who just weren't happy being pregnant. They were just, it was their culture not to use birth control. And they have 8, 9 children. They're exhausted. It's another child. And I think we as child-free women, and I do this out of because I get joy out of it, can help them with all the children. I actually benefit from that.
Yeah.
But we also need to realize there are women in that position as well. Many.
Oh yeah, many, absolutely. Yeah, and that's that saddens me a lot, because I really don't think at this point in time we need children just for the sake of having them or having a bigger.
Well, in the past, they needed that.
Yeah, in the past they needed that, but not
Because of the
now.
agriculture and there's no social security or anything like systems that we have systems now where
Yeah.
people older can be taken care of. And also children used to die a lot, even up until 50, 60 years ago. Many young children would die. So you'd end up, maybe if you had 8 children, you would end up with 1 or 2 children, right? But it's not that way now. We have many, many countries good health care.
Yeah.
And I would have to circle back, Corinne, about the grief, about the sadness. And one thing I learned in the best college course I took was psychobiology of women, is that the period when we have our menstruation period and we're letting that egg go, that dream, that potential of having a child, our body grieves.
Mhm.
And that's why we cry. A lot of us cry. A lot of us go through the cycle of right before the period, have a lot of energy. And then we get into the sadness, crying, because it's our body grieving the potential of not having a child. And that's biological, that's psychological. And so, yes, we still go through that monthly, and it's good to honor that. In the old times, they had things called red tents.
Yes. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
of
that the
course.
women get together and honor that together and grieve together and get through it and move on.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just the grieving. I think it's important to point out it's not just the grieving around the child, or the body. Yeah, well, as you just explained, it's also the any grieving, the period is a time to release anything, that needs to be acknowledged, but then also you can let it go and then move into the new fresh cycle with the ongoing inner spring, right? Yeah, I agree. And I think that bodily, maybe as we get older and we are getting towards the last, more towards perimenopause, there, which can be different age for different women, but these layers do come up again for a woman who didn't have children around her ovulation or around her period. It can be that way, and not every month. Maybe it's once a year. Like it will be different for every woman, but it's important to not push it away. But also, you don't need to act on it either. Yeah, it's be with it, and then see where this evolution wants to take you. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Be with it. Be with your emotions and let them come as they come and let them go. Go through them. I think in the Western cultures I've spent a lot of time in, we learn to hold our emotions in and hide them. And for example, like in the Middle East, there's a funeral, people are going to cry, be loud. And in the funeral here in the United States, you're going to bite your tongue and not cry and hold it in. It's so important to hold those emotions and go through them, allow them,
Mm.
and let them
Mm.
go. Yes.
Mm. Yeah, fully agree.
And
Fully
I want
agree.
to add one more thing too. As I get older, and I'm spending more time with menopausal women because my friends are becoming menopausal, they're older. There's a gift when you get older, and there's great gifts in your 50s, which I'm at now, and you learn just not to care as much what people think. And that's why I think you see the bolder crones or the strong women when they get 50s, 60s. And I heard that sometimes for Native American cultures that 53 is a big age, or 52, and that's changeover is
Mm.
very important.
Well, women come into their second spring, really.
Is that what it's called? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Well, from what I've learned around, also when the period is kind of when you really are in the menopause and you're no longer bleeding, that's really when your second life's work is
Mm.
gonna come through often. So yeah, and I like how more and more women these days speak to the beauty and the wisdom in aging, yeah, instead of wanting to be young uh, and all life long, whether that is in the way, in everything, in every way of how our bodies change, but also, how we evolve. Yeah.
And that's something beautiful about the older cultures, because the elderly, the senior citizens, the older people are respected for what they are. In like the United States, a newer culture, senior citizens are not treated well. They're not respected.
Yeah.
So I think there's something good to learn from the older cultures.
Yeah, well,
That
I think the older cultures more often they still have this tradition of having elders within the
mm,
community, right? And
yeah,
and that's not grandparents, yeah,
right.
that's elders, that teenage that people can go to for guidance, yeah. And I know, that used to have elders women, and elders men, and this is a very is healthy for a
Mhm.
society to have that. But yeah, we push kind of the older people away. We just kind of no longer, yeah, we don't honor it as we should. But it's slowly, right? As we honor age again and aging, hopefully it will come back.
And I think that will help the world. We're in a lot of trouble right now with many, many things.
Yeah,
And we need people of all ages, all generations to work together on these solutions.
yeah,
And I try to help the younger generations as much as I can, or help them or show them this is the trouble I had trying to do this. You don't need to go through this again. Let me tell you my experience, and you can do a different way. You
mm,
don't have to do same way, and
Mhm.
it with the same results. You can get better results in your life.
Sorry, there's something popping up here. Yes. Oh, oh God. Sorry. I'm back here. A window popped
Okay.
up. Yeah, and I wanted to point out one more thing because you have really traveled extensively, but also really lived in, like you lived in Germany, in Japan, in Italy, in Switzerland. You speak many different languages. Actually, talking different languages is one of your hobbies. You love
Yes.
it. Um, in what way do you think would all that have been possible if you would have had your own child?
I think it would have been a very different experience. I think, yes, possible, but would have taken a much longer time because you can learn when you're having children around, you can,
Mm,
but I wouldn't have been able to travel so much or be in so many different places. And if I had a child, I'd have to leave them.
mm,
So that'd be very, very difficult. I think in some of the places I was at, it was not proper to have a child.
mm,
So I know also in my life I've ended up in hospitals,
mm.
and even having the cat and leaving the cat for weeks on end felt terrible. So
Yeah.
and even my partner and I are looking right now about getting a cat. We're deciding not to get a cat because we like to travel.
Mm,
So having a child is even more. And it's just that freedom. So right now, kind of like what I do with children is I help take care of the people's children. I teach other people's children. We also take care of other people's cats.
yes.
So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
not having that because animals and children are great, great responsibilities.
Yeah. I got a dog, right? And that for me has really helped me also
Ah,
to make peace with
uh-huh.
living the child, like with the child-free life to some extent, because I really got quite a lot of mothering raising, training the dog. We got him as a puppy out of that, and so it
Yeah.
it, it was an important piece in my story around, yeah, coming to really embrace the child-free life, having a dog, yeah.
Right.
And every
What
time we go away, I feel so guilty. But he's having a great time. That's the thing. Like it's not.
But to get back to your question, I think I've done a lot of civil rights work in mental health United States.
Mhm.
And that's taken so much time and energy and being there. I would not have been able to get those successes had I had a child. I
Mm.
really believe that, Corinne. So for me, it was important. It was a sacrifice, and yet it brought great, great gifts, and not just to me, but to many, many other people in this country, or at least in Oregon. I'll say in Oregon, okay? We'll leave it at that. And those gifts needed to be expressed in the world. And I couldn't express them, as you said, if I had a child.
Ah, I love, I want to leave it. It was a sacrifice, but it brought great, great gifts, not to only to yourself, but to the people. Yeah, a lot of people in
Mhm,
Oregon and other
mhm.
places. Yes. Wow. Well, thank you for that. Is there anything else that you burn to share? Is there anything else that you would still like to express to maybe also someone who is also, dealing with mental health? Anything that you want to, word of wisdom or inspiration
Well,
or
I
hope?
think for mental health, for all of us, healing is an inside job.
Mm,
So, what I've learned is that when I put myself in places with other people that lift me up, with other places that, like in nature, I go to nature a lot to go heal, hot springs, good food, organic food, and good people. If I'm with people who complain, I feel all like this. But if I'm with people who are more open, looking forward, and are just supportive, I feel better. So I'm learning I don't have to be around those people who don't support the dreams I'm on. It's okay to let go of that and be with the people who support you in your best dreams.
mm, mm. Beautiful. think we can all take something from that. Oh, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for your open sharing and for the work that you do and in the way you bring your care and your love and your gifts, to the world, to the wider world.
Thank
It's
you. And I'd
beautiful.
also like to thank those parents who let me be with their children. So I know for them it helps, but it helps me. It's mutually beneficial. So thank you to those people too who share the children.
Yeah, it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
It's a win-win. Oh, all right. Well, so this was Anne Casper today. And if you have been listening and you long to find fulfillment and, meaning in your life without having a child, yeah, and living your unique feminine expression in the world, yeah, outside of motherhood, then, I have a program coming up. It's a 6 months transformative group program called Creating Magic and Meaning Beyond Motherhood. And in this program, we address all that, things we spoke to today here with Anne. But yeah, really, how you can thrive and be at peace and confident and bring your gifts into the world, as a child-free, childless woman. And you can find that on my website on rebelheartwoman.com. All right, so there's going to be more conversations coming up as well in the next few weeks. Listen in, and there's already other ones on my channel, so you can also listen to those, if you're just here for the first time today. All right, goodbye for now. Have a wonderful day. Bye.